I rushed home to grab the contract and return to the office in time to sign the biggest deal of the year. But as soon as I opened the door, I froze at the sound of my husband sobbing. He was saying, "Dad, I got my secretary Kinsley 7 months pregnant. My wife doesn't know anything." His father said, "You've disgraced this entire family, Hunter. Be honest and apologize to your wife before things get worse." Right after that, my husband cried even louder and said something that made my whole body tremble. I could no longer stand. My name is Michelle Barrett, 35 years old, top saleswoman at Lexus Detroit for 3 consecutive quarters. And I still remember that afternoon vividly. A clear Friday sky over Detroit. I came home earlier than usual, planning to retrieve the contract I had stayed up all night preparing, but forgot to bring in the morning rush. It was a major deal between our Lexus showroom and a renowned tech company downtown, who ordered 10 2025 Lexus LX 600S to reward their top employees. A deal I was proud of, one I had spent an entire quarter securing. I opened the door to our quiet 2-story home in the suburbs, intending to stay just a few minutes before returning to the office. But as soon as I stepped inside, I heard sobbing from the kitchen. The crying, it was strange, didn't sound like my husband Hunter. Hunter, 38 years old, CEO of Metro West Holdings, one of the fastest-growing real estate firms in the region. To the world, he was always confident, composed, never revealing emotion. But now, he was slumped over the kitchen table, on the phone with Joseph, his father, voice trembling, cracking like a child. "Dad, I got my assistant Kinsley 7 months pregnant. Michelle doesn't know anything." I froze in the doorway. Every word he said hit me like a punch to the chest. My breath caught, my palms went cold. All I could do was lean against the wall, afraid even to breathe in case he noticed me. On the other end of the line, my father-in-law's voice dropped, weary and full of disappointment. "You've disgraced this entire family, Hunter. Michelle is a good woman, you know that. End it with Kinsley and apologize to your wife before things get worse." But Hunter broke down harder, his voice shattering. "I can't. She's pregnant. And Michelle can't have kids with me." It felt like someone was squeezing my heart. So this so-called destiny of ours was just temporary pity. I had believed in his silences, thinking they held the pain of a man who almost died. But now, I saw it was just cowardice masked by tears. My father-in-law continued, his tone heavy. "Do you remember who stayed by your side during the 6 months you were in a coma? You drove drunk, and the doctors said you might never wake up. I advised Michelle to file for divorce, to take the chance to move to New York and become the director of Lexus New York. But Michelle, the very woman you're betraying, refused that career opportunity to stay and take care of you, day in and day out." At that moment, everything came flooding back. I saw myself 3 years ago, sitting by his hospital bed in that sterilized room, brewing coffee each morning, reading the financial news each night, just so he could get used to his wife's voice again. As the doctor said, it might help his recovery. I believed. And I waited. For 6 months straight, I held his hand and whispered, "I'm here." And when he opened his eyes, I thought it was a miracle. I didn't know that the day he woke up was also the day he began to drift away from me. Now, in that kitchen, the man I had saved was crying over another woman. I didn't say anything. I quietly stepped back, heart pounding in my chest. My mind scrambled through fragments of memory. Vague client dinner expenses, a photo at a downtown bar where he said he was meeting a VIP, and the second phone he always kept with him. Put together, they formed a brutally clear picture. I wasn't angry. I didn't scream. I just felt a hollow chill inside. I told myself, gather evidence first. React later. I knew I was walking into a battle, not to keep a husband, but to reclaim the truth. I grabbed my car keys and walked out the door. The evening wind swept across the red brick path leading to Maple and Steam, the little cafe I always visited when I needed to clear my mind. Warm yellow lights spilled onto the wooden tables. Mary Ann, the owner, a widow in her mid-60s, was wiping down the counter. She looked up and smiled. "Another long day at Lexus, sweetheart?" I nodded, hiding my tears, and whispered, "Longer than usual, Marianne." I chose my usual corner by the window, opened my laptop, and began searching. Private investigators in Detroit, divorce attorneys in Michigan, downtown apartment rental records. Every click was a new breath, a step in the plan I had just named in my mind. Father's Day exposure. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I would expose him in front of everyone, on Father's Day itself, the day he proudly claimed to be the man of the family. I knew I had lost a husband, but I also knew it was time to reclaim myself. Outside, light rain tapped on the stone-paved sidewalk, reflecting the headlights from the main street. Inside me, there was no more pain, only clarity. I looked at my laptop screen, created a new folder, and typed, "Father's Day exposure." I would be silent no more. I would protect no one anymore. I would let him destroy himself with the very secrets he tried to bury. A scene played out in my mind. The Father's Day brunch at the country club. The family's usual gathering spot, with my father-in-law's smug smile, the clinking of glasses, and the warm wishes to the man of the family. I would choose that very day, that very hall, to reveal everything. I opened PowerPoint, created the first slide, white text on a black background. Father's Day exposure, the truth you tried to hide. The screen's glow reflected onto my face in the misted glass. A woman stared back. No longer the betrayed, but the one in control. I began listing financial evidence, photos, witnesses, timeline, location. Everything had to be indisputable. At the bottom, I typed a small note. No more silence. No more protection. Outside, wind chimes tinkled softly against each other. I sipped the bitter coffee, then shut my laptop, feeling as though I had just signed my own Declaration of Freedom. This Father's Day would no longer be theirs. It would be the day of truth. The next morning, as the first light of sun streamed through the curtains, I sat at the dining table and opened the laptop Hunter and I used to manage our work. He had already left the house early, as usual, tie neatly adjusted, his familiar cologne still lingering in the air, and his usual brief farewell as he stepped out the door. "I've got a meeting downtown, might be home late." As the door closed, the house fell into such silence I could hear Cooper's steady breathing under the table. I opened the laptop that Hunter and I often used together for business tracking. He thought I never touched the expense records of his company, but I used to help him go over major transactions, car purchases, advertising costs, and client entertainment. I understood how every dollar flowed, how each category aligned with its expenses. I logged into the expense management account his company used. Everything looked normal until I scrolled down to the recent expenditures. One payment caught my eye. $4,950. Rental payment, Midtown Towers. I froze. Midtown Towers was a high-end apartment complex right across from his office downtown. I kept scrolling. $2,800. Medical clinic, IOASH, prenatal services. Then another transaction, $1,200. Café Lumina, event catering. My heart began to race. When I added it all up, the total exceeded $138,000, far too much to be just business expenses. Yet every invoice had been charged to the company credit card, one that only Hunter had access to. I understood immediately what was happening. He was using company funds to support that woman, from her apartment to her OB/GYN to even her baby shower. He was building a second life with corporate money, right in the heart of the city, while coming home to me every night, lying that he was working late on a big project. I hit print, and page after page emerged from the printer with the cold, mechanical sound of judgment. Every line item, every transaction, was a razor-sharp slice of truth. I placed everything into a brown file folder, hand-labeled, Business Misuse, Evidence. As I sealed the folder, I felt an odd, steady calm settle over me. If he could lie with money, I would unveil the truth with proof drawn from those very dollars. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the laptop screen, and one name floated through my mind: Kinsley. I needed to know who she really was, where she lived, and just how deep her role ran in this story. If those payments tied back to her name, then the next proof would surely be found wherever she appeared. That afternoon, I drove through the city center, my heart pounding every time I passed a street Hunter had claimed to be meeting with clients. I turned down the road opposite Hunter Development Group, the one lined with upscale apartments I had just seen listed in the financial records. I parked on the curb, pretending to check my phone. And then I saw her, Kinsley, the intern secretary I'd met once at his company's year-end party, a young woman with glimmering blue eyes and a smile that would make any married man look twice. I remembered clearly how Hunter had introduced her to me, with pride in his voice. "She's the fastest learner in the department." I even smiled politely back then. Thinking of that now, that smile feels idiotic. Kinsley sat outside a cafe near the apartment building, wearing a light blue dress that clung gently to the figure of someone 7 months pregnant. She smiled as she rubbed her belly, chatting on the phone. Probably with him. It all unfolded in broad daylight, right before my eyes, as if there was nothing to hide. I didn't need to hear a single word. That scene alone confirmed everything I had suspected. I took out my phone and quietly snapped a few photos from inside the car, all in public spaces: the street, the cafe, the building's facade. Perfectly legal. My lens caught the moment Kinsley looked up toward Hunter's office, her gaze soft and unbothered, so serene it made my skin crawl. I saved the photos and labeled them Midtown Towers, 12:17 p.m. The evidence now wasn't just on paper. It was alive, breathing, and smiling out there. I started the car and drove off slowly, a chill clarity spreading through me. I didn't head straight home. I turned toward the small park by Lafayette Lake, where maple trees were beginning to cast long shadows over the water. I sat on an old wooden bench, watching children play tag, a heaviness pressing down on me. Memories surged. Those quiet afternoons when the two of us would sit in this very park, Hunter feeding Cooper ice cream, while I laughed until tears came as the dog got cream all over his nose. Back then, Hunter looked at me with gentle eyes and said, "I don't need anything else but you." I believed that, purely, completely. And now, foolishly, I used to look forward to coming home early, cooking dinner myself, picking the wine, listening to him talk about new deals. I used to find joy in little things like that. But now, the thought of going home and seeing him, the man who had lied to me for months, made me nauseous. I sat there for a long time, watching as the sunset dyed the lake red. The pain no longer surged. It simmered, slow and cold, more cutting than any tear. When the sun disappeared behind distant buildings, I took a deep breath and stood up. I knew I had to stay calm, had to play the role of the wife who knew nothing, until the truth was unveiled on Father's Day. I drove home in the late afternoon, cool lake wind streaming through the window. Everything around me was unchanged. Mrs. Helen trimming the lawn, kids cycling in the street, and our two-story house still as peaceful as if it weren't harboring a storm. I pulled into the garage, fixed my expression in the mirror, before stepping inside. Nothing could give me away. Hunter was already home, shirt still crisp, familiar scent of cologne lingering in the kitchen. He asked like nothing had happened. "How was your day? Sell any LX 600s?" I smiled, my voice calm. So calm it surprised even me. 3. Seems like everyone's leaning toward pearl white over black. He chuckled, poured wine, and talked about his upcoming project. I responded just enough, like any wife chatting with her husband at dinner. Except I knew every word from him was a lie. When he got up to clear the plates, I watched his back and felt like I was observing a stranger. On the table, Cooper looked up at me, his deep brown eyes full of something that felt like understanding. He gently nudged his head against my leg, then lay down with a quiet sigh. I reached down, stroked his head, and whispered softly, "Good boy. Stay silent like mommy, okay?" The mask had been perfectly placed. A quiet dinner, a fake smile, and a plan growing steadily inside me, hour by hour, minute by minute. That night, after Hunter had fallen asleep, his breathing slow and even in the dark room, I lay still beside him, phone lit beneath the covers. I messaged Ryan Cooper, an old friend from our days in community service, now a Detroit cop. The text was short. "Ryan, I need a reliable private investigator." Personal matter? Very discreet. A few minutes later, he replied, "There's someone. Used to work for a big insurance firm. Very good. Name's Marcus Flynn. I'll have him contact you." I stared at the glowing screen in the dark, feeling as if I had flipped a switch I could never turn off again. I put the phone down, turned toward Hunter, sleeping soundly, like a man who'd never betrayed anything. The glow from the nightstand clock cast a faint light on his face, and in that moment, I realized I was a stranger to the man lying next to me. The next morning, I returned to Maple and Steam, the place where every major decision of mine seemed to begin. The Detroit sky was overcast, and soft rain fell on the cafe's wooden awning. I ordered a black Americano, sat in my usual window corner. At exactly 8:30, the door opened. A tall man in a brown leather coat walked in, eyes sharp with the precision of someone used to studying details. "Ms. Barrett?" he asked, voice low and firm. "Yes," I said, standing to shake his hand. "Marcus Flynn," he introduced himself. "Used to be with Michigan Mutual Insurance. I work independently now. Ryan from Detroit PD sent me." I nodded. "I need you to verify some things, quietly and within legal boundaries." I slid a white envelope across the table. $4,000 in retainer cash. Marcus glanced at it and gave a small nod. He didn't ask much, just said, "Give me 3 days. I'll know exactly who Kinsley is, when she and your husband started, and whether she even knows she's wrecking someone's home." I looked at him, catching the calm gaze of a man who'd seen too many betrayals. I said quietly, "I don't want to harm her unborn children. I just want discrete evidence." Marcus stood, buttoned his coat. "I understand. She won't know the wife of the father of her babies is investigating her." 3 days later, I received an email from him. "Investigation results. Confidential." I opened the file. Each line felt like a cut to the chest. Kinsley, 23 years old, intern at Hunter's company, set to become full-time after graduation. Believes Hunter is separated and planning to marry her. 7 months pregnant with twins, fully supported by him. Housing, medical, living expenses at Midtown Towers. I read it 3 times, then closed the laptop. Strangely, I didn't cry. Maybe because the tears had dried long ago. Only numbness remained. That evening, we had dinner under familiar golden lights. Hunter spoke of shareholder meetings and expansion plans. I nodded, smiled, responded like I was still the trusting wife. Beneath the table, Cooper curled at my feet, occasionally licking my hand as if he could sense I was holding myself together, barely. I stared at the glass of red wine before me, thinking of the man named Marcus Flynn, the first person in years to tell me, "You're not crazy, you're just more awake than the people around you." 30 minutes later, as I was clearing the dishes, my phone buzzed on the table. A message appeared. From James, Hunter's longtime best friend, and the groomsmen at our wedding. "Meet me privately." "Don't tell Hunter." I stared at the text, my heart tightening. In the past, James was the type who always defended Hunter, even when he was wrong. If he was reaching out now, something serious had happened. I replied simply, "Tomorrow morning." Maple and Steam. The next morning, I arrived early. The air was damp and cool, the wind chimes on the awning ringing softly each time the door opened. I sat in the same corner where I had met Marcus just days ago. A short while later, James walked in. He looked tired and conflicted. His shirt was wrinkled, eyes shadowed, as if sleep had eluded him all night. He sat down without meeting my eyes. "Michelle," he said softly, "I owe you an apology." I said nothing, waiting in silence. James sighed, setting down his coffee. At my birthday last week, the old gang was there. Hunter drank too much. And while drunk, he said something I can't forget. I looked up at him, my gaze pushing him to continue. He said, "Michelle can't have kids, so I'm letting Kinsley have them for us." That sentence left me paralyzed. Even though I had already suspected, hearing it confirmed from someone else felt like a knife driven into my heart. James went on, voice shaking. "My wife heard it. She got furious. Told me if I stayed friends with Hunter, she'd leave me. I stayed quiet for days, but the more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. He's crossed a line. I can't ignore it anymore." I looked at him for a long time, then said quietly but firmly, "Thank you, James. You don't need to say more. I'll handle it from here." He stood up, ready to leave. "Just be careful, Michelle. He's not the kind of man who goes down easy." I smiled. A cold, calm smile that surprised even me. "It's all right," I said. "I don't need him to go down. I just need the truth to win." When James left, I stayed seated, watching the last drops of coffee swirl in my cup. Outside, Detroit remained noisy and indifferent, unaware that a single sentence had just ended a marriage. I pulled out my phone, saved James's message as verbal testimony, and filed it away. The puzzle was coming together, and I knew the moment of reckoning was drawing near. That night, the air in Detroit was cool after the rain. I took Cooper for a walk around the neighborhood later than usual, hands in the pockets of a light jacket, my mind tangled in overlapping thoughts. As I passed the small house of Mrs. Helen Crawford, our elderly neighbor, who lived alone on Maple Street, she was watering hydrangeas on her porch. "Working late again, dear?" she asked, her voice warm and raspy with age. I smiled, masking my weariness behind the same familiar smile. "Yes, ma'am. It's a busy season at Lexus." She nodded, her kind eyes sensing something more. "Don't forget to eat. Strong women still need to take care of themselves." I thanked her and moved on, walking under the long shadows cast by the maple trees. When I returned home, Hunter had texted, "Working late downtown." The same old lie. I hung up my jacket, poured myself a small glass of wine, and opened my laptop. If he could build an entire narrative to hide the truth, then I would write its true version. I created an anonymous email account using a neutral name and posed as a contributor for a blog about women and professional life. The subject line was simple: "Interview request for intern on professional experience." The recipient: Kinsley Adams, the intern secretary at Hunter Development Group. It took me nearly 10 minutes to draft the message, friendly and casual enough to convince her it was a chance to be featured in an inspiring article. When I hit send, I inhaled deeply, my heart racing. Not from fear, but because for the first time, I was the one controlling the game. A little after 10 p.m., my inbox pinged. I opened the reply, and the words made my hand tremble. "Hi, I'd be happy to share. I'm currently interning at Hunter Development Group. He's a great, kind man. He said he's separated, just waiting for the paperwork to marry me. I know he has an ex-wife, but he told me she only cares about her job and that there's no love left. I think I'll help him find happiness again." I read it over and over, lips pressed tightly. That innocent message was the most damning proof yet, not just of betrayal, but of the manipulative lies Hunter had planted in someone else's mind. I saved the email, took screenshots, backed up copies to a secondary account. Then I sat motionless before the screen, watching the cursor blink like my own heartbeat, steady, cold, and devoid of emotion. At exactly 11:36 p.m., my phone lit up. A message from Hunter. "Good night," Miss You sent from downtown Detroit. His location pinged precisely at Midtown Towers. I didn't reply. I just stared at it, fingers tightening around the phone. My world may have been falling apart, but in that moment, I knew I was standing in the right place, on the side of truth. I turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and Cooper jumped up beside me, resting his head on my leg. Outside, the gentle patter of midnight rain on the roof sounded like the opening notes of a storm fast approaching. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet. I sat at my desk in the study, in front of my laptop, the file folder, and every image I had collected. What I felt wasn't pain or panic anymore. It was laser focus, as though I were preparing for the most important presentation of my life. I opened PowerPoint and finalized the Father's Day slideshow. On the screen, I inserted our wedding photo, an afternoon in the garden of our two-story home. Me, in a white dress, his hand in mine, eyes filled with a happiness that now felt bitterly fake. The next slide, I added screenshots of company account statements, the text clear. Payment, Midtown Towers, $4,950. Prenatal services, $2,800. Catering, $1,200. At the bottom, I typed in a note. Total, $138,000. Then came the email from Kinsley, written with innocent trust during our fake interview. He said he's finalizing his divorce and will marry me once it's done. I just want him to be happy. I stared at that line. Nothing is more brutal than a liar convincing someone their betrayal is an act of love. And finally, I inserted the photo of Hunter holding Kinsley on the balcony of Midtown Towers, taken by Detective Marcus Flynn with a long-range lens from a building across the street. The evening light glinted off the glass, but you could still clearly see his hand on her shoulder, his head tilted down, the tender smile I once believed was meant only for me. Each slide was a shard of truth, cold, precise, undeniable. I titled the presentation boldly, Father's Day Exposure, The Truth Behind the Perfect Family. I saved the entire file to a USB drive, slipped it into an envelope labeled, Private, Do Not Open Until Father's Day Brunch. It felt like I was stepping into the final stage of an investigation, where I was both the victim and the witness. That evening, when Hunter came home, he set his briefcase on the table, loosened his tie, and smiled. Just had a meeting with Dad. This year he wants to do Father's Day at the country club. Don't wear black, okay? The family likes brighter colors for photos. I looked up at him, my voice light and almost indifferent. I've already prepared. He raised an eyebrow, grinning. Prepared what? I smiled faintly, eyes never leaving the glowing laptop screen. A presentation you'll never forget. He laughed, thinking I was joking, and headed upstairs. And I simply watched his shadow fade up the staircase, feeling a stillness inside me so eerie it was almost serene. A storm was coming, and this time I would be the one who controlled it. Father's Day arrived faster than I expected. That morning, Detroit basked in golden sunlight beneath a clear blue sky. Luxury cars lined up outside Bloomfield Hills Country Club, where Hunter's family hosted their annual brunch. I checked my reflection one last time before leaving the house. A bold, flame-orange jumpsuit, gold heels, red lipstick. Not the subdued wife of a CEO, but the version of myself from before he ever entered my life. A woman who knew her worth, with nothing left to lose. In my clutch bag, the USB containing the presentation rested beside my lipstick. I had hired a photographer and videographer in advance, under the pretense of capturing a family celebration. But in my mind, everything had been calculated. Every frame, every word, every reaction would be recorded as evidence. The country club's grand hall was exquisitely decorated. Cream gold tablecloths, white lilies, a soft jazz band playing in the corner. Over 36 guests were present. Relatives, friends, business partners. Everyone dressed elegantly, laughing and chatting. I walked in like a splash of color against the neutral backdrop, drawing glances from all directions. Hunter saw me from across the room and paused slightly. As I approached, he forced a smile and said under his breath, "You look different today." I smiled calmly. Yes. I just decided to wear something I used to love. Before I became the wife of a CEO, he chuckled awkwardly, his hand lightly touching my back, lowering his voice. Dad wants me to give the opening speech. Just stand next to me, all right? I nodded, leaning in to whisper, Don't worry, I'll be right there. I just have a few words of my own. He hesitated. his eyes flickering with suspicion, but then he smiled tightly and walked away. At exactly noon, the brunch began. My father-in-law stood up, voice booming across the elegant room. "Thank you all for joining us this Father's Day. Our family has always been built on trust, honesty, and love." I smiled faintly. Trust, honesty, love. Such expensive words, and today I would return them to their true meaning. As he finished speaking, I stood up, my voice soft but clear. "Excuse me, may I have a few minutes? I have a little presentation for my husband, and for the family." The room fell silent. Hunter frowned. "Michelle, right now?" I nodded, inserted the USB into the projector. The large screen behind the podium lit up. First slide, our wedding photo in the garden of our two-story home. Me in a white dress, him holding my hand, the smile now painfully false. Next slide, a photo of Hunter holding pregnant Kinsley on the balcony of the Midtown Towers apartment, taken by Marcus Flynn. Whispers rippled through the room. I clicked forward. Slide 3. Company account statements showing $138,000 in expenses. Apartment rent, prenatal care, baby shower catering. Slide 4. Screenshot of Kinsley's email. The text crystal clear. "He said he's finalizing the divorce and will marry me once it's done." The air thickened. I could hear someone drop a wine glass. And then the final slide. A quote from Marcus's investigation, relayed by James, Hunter's best friend. "Michelle can't have kids, so I let Kinsley have them for us." The room froze. All eyes turned from the screen to Hunter, pale, trembling, his fingers gripping his wine glass. I turned back, voice steady and cold. "This is the man you all call a family role model. This is how he defines honesty and love." In the bottom corner of the slide, a note appeared. "All images and documents collected from public or legally accessible sources. No violation of privacy." My father-in-law rose, his voice cracking. I knew, but I didn't have the courage to speak. "I'm sorry, Michelle." That was the breaking point. Chaos erupted, shouts, chairs scraping, some guests leaving, others filming, snapping photos. Hunter stood frozen, his eyes glassy, not with guilt, but fear. I took off my wedding ring and dropped it into the half-full glass of wine in front of him. "My lawyer will contact you regarding the divorce and the division of 50% of your assets. I'll be suing the company for misuse of corporate funds to support a mistress." I gently tapped the edge of the table with my glass. "Happy Father's Day, Hunter." I turned and walked away. Behind me were shouts, voices calling my name, the sound of my father-in-law's sigh collapsing into defeat. But I didn't look back. I left the country club while the event was still in chaos. The Detroit sky had turned gray, heavy clouds gathering as if mirroring the mood of those left behind. I walked quickly to the car, kicked off my heels, tossed them onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. This drive had no music, no words, only the wind howling through the window. I drove straight to Midtown Towers, the apartment where Kinsley lived, the same place Hunter had been financially supporting for 7 months. When I arrived, I turned off the engine, inhaled deeply, and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup remained flawless, but the eyes were different. No longer those of the betrayed, but of someone ready to close a chapter. I stepped into the lobby, the scent of perfume and the sound of high heels echoing off the marble floor. The security guard nodded, assuming I was visiting a resident, and asked simply, "Who are you visiting, ma'am?" I replied, "Kinsley Adams, Unit 24B. He checked the list and nodded me through. As the elevator doors opened, I saw Kinsley standing at the reception counter, smoothie in hand. Her eyes widened in surprise, then confusion as I approached. "You're Kinsley Adams, correct?" I asked softly. She froze, nodded, her voice shaky. "Yes." "And you are?" I smiled, my gaze unwavering, enough for her to understand. "Hunter Barrett's legal wife." Kinsley's face went pale, her hand trembling so much she nearly dropped her drink. No, no way. He said he was divorcing. I I didn't even know you existed. I nodded slightly, my voice calm, as if discussing the weather. He told me the opposite, that you were just a little too friendly for an intern. The air in the lobby thickened. An elderly couple entering the building glanced our way, then quietly walked past. I motioned for Kinsley to sit on the nearby sofa. She hesitated, then obeyed. I opened my laptop and placed it on the coffee table in front of her. The screen lit up with familiar slides: apartment photos, company statements, the email she sent, and the photo of Hunter holding her on the balcony. Kinsley raised a hand to her mouth, eyes welling with tears. She shook her head, voice breaking. I I didn't know. He said his wife was cold, only cared about work. I really believed he was lonely. I looked at her. Not with anger, just clarity. She was a young woman pulled into a web of lies I once lived inside. I spoke softly, my tone gentler now. You're not the one at fault, Kinsley. The lies or tears streamed down her cheeks. She lowered her head and whispered, I'm sorry, Mrs. Barrett. I'll leave. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I closed the laptop, stood up, and nodded. No need to apologize. Just remember, never let anyone make you believe that deceit is love. I turned and walked away, the sound of my heels echoing steadily across the tiled floor. Behind me, Kinsley remained seated, one hand on her belly, tears falling silently. Outside, cold wind from the Detroit River swept across the wet pavement. I looked up at the sky. The storm had passed, but its echo would remain. And in my heart, I knew. My battle wasn't over, it had only just begun. 3 months after Father's Day, summer in Detroit blazed brightly, and the lives of everyone in that story had completely changed. Hunter was forced to resign as CEO by the board after an internal audit confirmed he had used company funds for personal expenses, including the $138,000 transferred to the Midtown Towers apartment rented for Kinsley. He lost executive control, his reputation crumbled, his shares were frozen, and now he lived quietly in a small apartment downtown. Each month, he was required by Michigan Civil Court to send financial support to both me and Kinsley. My father-in-law, once regarded as the moral pillar of the family, was now shunned by extended relatives. Board members refused to meet with him, and the once grand family dinners in Bloomfield were now attended by a few empty chairs. As for me, I kept the two-story house in Cooper, thanks to my lawyer proving they were my separate assets purchased before marriage, using my savings and inheritance from my grandmother, notarized in 2014. That house, once filled with silent tears, had become a symbol of renewal. My career at Lexus also shifted after the media picked up the story. I was no longer Michelle, the woman betrayed by her husband, but Michelle Barrett, the one who stood up. The Midwest Regional Board invited me to speak at an internal conference on female strength in the auto industry. My sales doubled, and co-workers jokingly dubbed me Queen of Lexus Detroit. One early fall afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the showroom glass, a middle-aged woman arrived to pick up her new car. Holding the contract, she gave me a sad smile. My husband just left me. After 22 years of marriage, he said he wanted to start over. I placed my hand gently on her shoulder and replied, I know that feeling. But you'll get through it, because women like us always find a way to steer forward, even when the road changes. She laughed, eyes glistening. That evening, I sat in the living room with Cooper, opened my laptop, and posted my first public status since everything happened. 7 years of infertility was never my fault. Loyalty doesn't deserve betrayal. The post spread quickly. By morning, I had hundreds of messages from women everywhere: Detroit, Chicago, Texas, Oregon, sharing stories they thought only they had suffered. I read each one, then decided to start a support group called No More Silence, a small online community where women could share, learn emotional self-defense, and rebuild trust after betrayal. I began posting short videos on social media, sharing lessons I'd learned, from how to stay calm when uncovering the truth, to how to stand tall in a divorce hearing. My story didn't end there. One day, the producer of the popular YouTube podcast Stories of Us reached out. They wanted me to share my journey in a special episode about women's courage. The title, She Exposed Her Husband on Father's Day. Within 72 hours of airing on YouTube and Spotify, it had over 200,000 listens. People online called me an icon of honesty and the woman who made truth fashionable. A week later, I was invited for a live interview on Detroit's local news channel. On camera, I didn't tremble. I looked directly into the lens and spoke slowly, every word clear. I don't want to be seen as a victim. Silence is not strength. The studio lights reflected off my hair, and I knew I was no longer the woman I once was. 1 week after the broadcast, Marcus Flynn, the private investigator, called me. His voice was low and tired. "Michelle, I've got a new client. She found out her husband's cheating with 3 interns. She needs advice more than evidence. I want you to help her." I looked down at Cooper, curled by my feet, and smiled gently. "Send her my way. Maybe it's time I help someone else rise, like I once did." I softly closed the laptop, sunset light pouring through the windows. The storm had passed, and from the wreckage of truth, a new beginning was taking shape, peaceful, grounded, and radiant. One quiet weekend afternoon, as sunlight stretched across the wooden floor through the window, I decided to clear out the back storage room, a small space filled with old cardboard boxes, once holding memories of me and Hunter. The smell of dusty wood and dried lavender made it feel like I was sorting through layers of my own past. I opened each box, organizing documents, photos, and keepsakes I once cherished. At the bottom of an old wooden box, I found a small yellowed envelope, handwritten in my mother's familiar script. Inside was a neatly folded paper, her handwriting tilted and careful. "When someone lies to you with tears, don't comfort them. Wipe your own." I read it over and over, hearing her voice in my mind, gentle but firm. My tears fell, not from sorrow, but from release. I framed the note in a small wooden frame and hung it on the living room wall, right beside the photo of Cooper and my mother. I wanted those words to greet me every morning, a reminder that true strength doesn't come from enduring, but from choosing to dry your own tears. A year later, Detroit in early spring was clear and hopeful. I returned to St. Anne Parish, the church I once attended with my in-laws. Back then, I always sat in the back, nodding quietly as others praised the sacrifice of a good wife. But today, I walked in wearing flats, carrying a small notebook. No longer a woman hiding tears behind smiles, I came as someone who now knew her worth. That day was Women's Sunday, when women shared real stories. When the host invited volunteers, I stood, took a deep breath, and looked around the room. "I used to think forgiveness meant letting them come back," I began calmly. But I was wrong. Forgiveness isn't about return, it's about moving forward, without the weight. The room was silent for a moment, then someone clapped, then another, and then the whole church rose, applause echoing beneath the old stone arches. I smiled. No bitterness, no blame, only the peace of someone who had weathered a storm, and was grateful to still be standing, still believing in her own goodness. After the church service, I realized something. Silence only allows harm to survive, while truth, when shared rightly, can heal both the speaker and the listener. So I started a small talk show called The Truth Table at Maple and Steam, the very cafe where it all began, where I first sat when I discovered Hunter's betrayal and vowed never to stay silent again. The first session had 6 women seated around a round wooden table. Each brought a story, a wound. No script, no stage lights, just coffee, tears, and laughter. I didn't call it a show, I called it honest therapy. Every week, new faces joined. A 25-year-old woman who just left a toxic marriage. A 60-year-old mother after 3 decades of silence. A young student who said she watched my video on Stories of Us and chose not to return to her abusive boyfriend. Every story was a piece of courage, and I sat among them, not as a teacher, but as someone who once fell and now helps others rise. One afternoon, just as the session ended, Mrs. Helen Crawford, my elderly neighbor, walked in wearing a gray cardigan, holding a golden baked apple pie, its sweet aroma filling the room. "Welcome back to real life," she said, placing it on the table. I stepped forward and hugged her. Tears welled up again, but this time not from pain, from gratitude, that I hadn't only reclaimed myself, but found a community of sincerity. Cooper darted around the table, his golden tail wagging, his paws tapping across the wooden floor. Some women laughed, others pulled out their phones to capture the moment. Laughter rang out in the cafe, mingling with the scent of roasted coffee and warm pie, like someone had flung open the window to let sunlight pour in after a long storm. I sat down, sipping coffee, looking around. Smiling faces, eyes no longer afraid. And I realized this was the true reward of it all, not the takedown of a liar, but the rebirth of wounded souls learning to tell their stories without trembling. One spring morning, soft golden sunlight streamed through the curtains, landing on the kitchen counter where Cooper lay dozing. I was making coffee when the phone rang. The screen showed Mrs. Sanders, a former client who'd bought a Lexus LX from me 2 years earlier. I answered, her voice trembling. "Michelle, I heard your story on the podcast. I'm going through the same. My husband's cheating with someone at work, and I don't know where to start." I leaned against the counter, looking out at tulips blooming in the yard, and gently said, "You don't have to be strong today. Just be honest with yourself. The rest will become clearer." Silence on the line, then a soft sigh, like a burden released. I smiled, knowing even one sentence can be the start of someone else's healing, just like mine began on a tearful afternoon. Days later, under Detroit's blue skies and cool lake breeze, I opened the door to my new Lexus RX 350, a gift from the company after I became Queen of Lexus Detroit. Cooper jumped into the passenger seat, resting his head on the window, brown eyes sparkling in the sun. I drove out of the neighborhood, along Jefferson Avenue's Lakeside Road, then toward Belle Isle Bridge, where I once walked Cooper during my loneliest days. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. Wind tousled my hair, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. I turned on the radio. "Rise Again" began to play. Soft guitar, a warm, husky female voice. I smiled. My own voice overplayed, gentle but steady. "He lost everything because of lies. I found everything because of the truth." On the bridge, sunlight shimmered across the water, like a path to the future. Cooper tilted his head, barked softly, as if agreeing. I reached out to stroke him, a wave of peace washing over me. In the distance, the city of Detroit glowed in the morning sun. Glass towers reflecting blue skies, bridges connecting two sides. Proof that from what's broken, we can rebuild. Stronger, brighter, and more real. As the car crossed the bridge, the imaginary camera pulled back. Glistening water, clear skies, wind blowing through my golden hair. The screen faded to black. Across a sunlit Detroit skyline, these words appeared. "Some women burn bridges. Others build new cities." The music faded. Only the wind and a steady heartbeat remained. The story closed, not with revenge, but with freedom. If you've ever faced betrayal, know this. Silence won't save you. Truth will set you free. Share your story. Tell the world women are not weak or emotional. We are stronger and wiser than they imagine. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to join me for more courageous journeys. Stories not only of pain, but of power and rebirth.